although everyone knows you, but let's start with a quick introduction for the newcomers who are watching you for the very first time at PI Consulting Pro over here.
Thank you, Jay. It's always a pleasure to come and talk to you. Just a quick introduction. My name is Chandeep. I right now live in India, and I mostly work on Power BI, do consulting and training work for organizations here in India, sometimes abroad. And also on the side, I run a YouTube channel in the name of Goodly. Ironically, my YouTube channel has somehow gotten the sense that this is Power Query channel, specific channel. But then I talk sometimes about visualization, sometimes about DAX and things like that. So it's an all-round channel around Power BI and Excel. But because of the consulting assignments that I have done off late, my focus has been a lot of ETL and data cleansing because the data that I have been thrown at, it was pretty bad. So Power Query became the centerpiece of the content that I create. But yeah, that's what I do.
Great. So for everyone out there, if you are watching Goodly for the very first time, please do remember that he creates lots of very interesting contents over the internet for whether you are a Power BI user, you are an Excel user, or you are just entering into this data feed. So you are going to find a lots of material for that. I'm going to provide a link also in the description section so that you can subscribe his channel and can follow for all the updates that he is doing an amazing stuff over there. All right. So Goodly, or shall I call you Chandeep? So what we are going to do today?
Sure. So when I was thinking about what am I going to present, I thought of nothing better than a few very interesting, commonly done data transformation tasks in Power Query. Yeah. And then how could you just enhance those tasks if you were to just write a little bit of M code? Right. Not only will you get more flexibility, your queries are going to be more dynamic, and then you will have more possibilities of achieving more things rather than the standard UI of Power Query. So that's what I have for you. I guess I've about 7-8 tricks. Let's see how many can we cover, but that's what I have at the moment.
Great. So let's start with those tips, and I'm sure the users are going to love it because
it's
always something new there.
Absolutely. So allow me to share my screen. I am just going to share the screen. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, it's perfectly visible. We can see that.
All right. My assumption is everybody knows how to open up Power Query, right? Because right now,
this is a very basic step. And guys, if you don't know, then I'm also going to provide you some of the tutorials link from the basics or from the scratch. So you can start watching them too.
Right. I'm assuming that you know how to open up Power Query. I'm currently working in Excel right here. This is an Excel file, and I have just opened up the Power Query editor there. My first trick is going to be dynamic expansion of the columns. What do I mean by that? Let's just take a look. So I am going to try to grab the data from multiple Excel files and try to expand them automatically. Let's see if we are able to do that. I will also talk about the user interface approach, that how do people do that in the user interface. And then I will talk about several benefits of doing that with the M language. All right, let's go. So I'm going to start to write the M code. I'm going to write a lot of M code, and I will give you instructions on how this M code is being generated, how we are going to read it, and things like that. Hopefully it'll make sense to you.
Can we just quickly tell the users like what is M code or M query, like for the new users who even doesn't have any idea, what is this? Like a short description over here.
Sure. So when you click the buttons up on the user interface right here, obviously the thing that you get to see are the steps in Power Query. These steps are translated into a programming language, which is Power Query's programming language, also called as M. The full form is mashup. You can see the part of the language up here in the formula bar, and that's what we're going to use a lot today. Also, if you just went over to the View tab and clicked on the Advanced Editor, that is also where you can take a look at the M code that has been generated. For the people who work with the user interface, you must have just clicked the buttons up on the top, got the steps right here, and the M code is generated automatically for you. But in this session, we will write it. Every single bit of it, we will write it. It's just going to give you a lot more flexibility than just clicking buttons, right? It's just going a step beyond that. All right. So generally, the way you would get the data from multiple Excel files is that you're going to click on the Home tab, say New Source, Files from a folder, and then you just pick up the folder that you want to get the data from. However, the formula that is being used if you were to click all of those buttons is called folder.files, and that's what I'm going to use, folder.files. Now in folder.files, it is asking you, hey, which folder is that? So let's just navigate to the folder. So here is my folder, which is on my desktop, and I want to go in the years folder, which is where I have 3 Excel files that I want to combine the data from. So I'm going to copy that path right here, paste that path in the inverted commas because that's a piece of text. And once I do that, you can see that Power Query has dynamically gotten the ingredients of that folder. We can see the 3 files that we have from that folder.
Wow, that's quite convenient as compared to going through so many buttons and everything.
Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
All right, once we are there, generally, if you have been working with the user interface, it is not hard to believe that you don't know of this particular button. You would obviously know that. So there's a combine button. What this does is this is going to combine the 3 files. Binary simply means a file. It could be a CSV file, a PDF file, an Excel file, any file. If I click on the side of the file, I can also take a look at the preview of the file right here at the bottom, but that generally means a file.
Yeah.
What this does is this creates like a helper query and a helper function. This is going to get you to combine the data using the user interface. There are a few limitations with this, or you can call it benefits. But then if the names of the sheets are different, if the columns of the different Excel files are different, then obviously it is not going to work as well as you would expect it to be. So what we're going to do is we are going to keep this dynamic. Generally, the structure of the Excel file is something like this. So you have an Excel file. From the Excel file, you go to the sheet level. And from the sheet level, you go to the data of that particular sheet. That's how the Excel files are structured. So from the file, you jump over to sheet, and from the sheet, you jump over to the data. So at the moment, I have the file, which is the binary. I'm going to write a couple of functions in Power Query to convert these binaries into sheet level data. And from the sheet level data, then we will go to the actual data itself. All right, let's just go. So I'm going to click on the step right here, which creates a new step. And I'm going to say something like, I would like to transform this particular column. So I will use the function table.transform. Damn it, my spellings. Transform columns. And I'm going to say that the table that I'm trying to work with is the previous step, which is this particular table. In this entire table, the column that I'm looking forward to have is the content column, right? Because that's what contains the 3 binaries. Yeah. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say the column that I'm trying to work with is the content column. So curly braces, content column. And what do I want to do in the content column? I would like to go in the content column and take every single Excel file and convert that into a readable sheet level data. So I'm going to write a function called Excel. Sorry, there was a comma here. Excel.workbook. All right. One was missing. Close the bracket. Hopefully that should work. Spelling is incorrect. Transform columns. That works. All right. So if you take a look at the difference between the first step and the second step is that in the first step we had binaries. In the second step, in the content column, we now have 3 tables. Now, if you peek into the table, you're going to see that we are able to take a look at the sheets of that Excel file. So 2005 Excel file has just, 2005 Excel file has just got 1 sheet, and here is the data of that particular sheet. All right. And then similarly, you can peek into 2006. Similarly, you can peek into 2007. What I'm going to do now, sorry, you have a question?
Yes. So Chandi, how can user learn these different M query or let's say M language different functions over there? Like you are an expert, but for a new beginners who's just starting their career and they want to learn them more, then how they can learn these?
Okay, so I will tell you 2 things. First of all, I will shamelessly promote my upcoming course on the M language.
Definitely, you should. People should learn.
So I'm going to be creating a course on the M language, which hopefully is releasing by the end of September. And if you would want, you can enroll into that. Definitely. The announcements of the course is going to be released on my YouTube channel, and you can take a look at that. Great. But let's say, for example, you want to learn it by yourself, like you want to do the hard work and you want to learn everything by yourself. So what I would recommend is, let's say, a 3-stage approach. Stage number 1 is that you have to get comfortable with this particular button right here, the custom column. Yeah. The custom column is where I started to write my M functions. Custom column means just adding a column to your table. So here is a table, and custom column is going to add a new column to the table. Now, you can write simple functions like trim function, like some random formulas here and things like that. That is going to give you the ability to just write some M code. Even if, let's say, for example, you make a mistake here and you get an error, the error is going to be contained at the row level. It will not break your query. Right. So your first row could have the correct answer, your second row could have the error, and your third row could maybe generate the right answer. So your errors are still going to be contained at the row level. So that's where I would recommend to start first. Once you have gotten comfortable writing the M code in the custom formula, then the second thing that I would recommend you is to start looking at the code that gets generated up on the formula bar. A lot of people still till this date do not have the formula bar activated because it doesn't come by default. So you'll have to go to the view tab and then activate the formula bar, and that's how you get the formula bar. Once you start to become comfortable, you have to take a look at what is the M code that is generated by Power Query automatically once you click the buttons up on the top. That is going to give you some understanding of what the M code is, and you can tweak it, you can make changes to it, and things like that. However, the difference is this code can break the query completely. So it's a second level of risk. Once you are comfortable writing the M code up in the formula bar, the third stage is to go to the advanced editor and then start writing the code right here.
Yeah.
So those are the three-step process that I've used. But in order for you to learn different M functions, there is no other way than to just observe, watch a lot of videos, and just rack your brains.
Yeah. So for all the users out there and the viewers who are watching this video now, probably you have your answer for this question, how you can start learning this. For the beginners, it seems a difficult one, but I'm sure once you're going to get habitual to this, you are going to find this more convenient as compared to clicking the buttons here and there. User interface is good, but when you know how to write a code and how to transform the data using these M functions, then this is going to make your life much easier and you are going to be an expert over there. And also, I'm going to provide you all the links in the description section that just Chandeep mentioned for his upcoming course. So please don't forget to watch his channel for more videos and more updates, and you can enroll yourself onto that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
let's start.
Cool. Okay, so if you remember what we were trying to say here, we had at the files, these are binaries, and these binaries have been converted into tables. If I peek into the table, I'm able to take a look at the sheet level data. Let's just expand these tables. So if I click on the expand button, uncheck the original name column prefix, all the buttons, all the columns are fine, click on OK, and that's the data. Now, if any particular Excel file had two sheets, not one, you would have gotten two rows of data, not one, which is like a benefit if you're trying to work with the M language.
Yeah.
And now I have been able to open up all the names of the sheets. These are all sheet one, sheet one, sheet one. The names are same. And here is where I can take a look at the very data. So this is where I can take a look at all the columns right here and all of that kind of stuff right here.
Yeah.
Nice. The only problem at the moment is that if I were to click on the expand button right here, not promoted. You can see that the headers are actually there in the first row of the data. However, the headers should actually be there at the headers position right here. Indeed. So headers are not promoted. Now, obviously, you can use another function in Power Query called table.promote headers, but there is a trick. What is the trick? If you just recall, a while ago, we were using this particular function called excel.workbook. What this function was doing is this function was taking the binary, converting that into a readable sheet level data, and then we opened up the data of every single sheet. This function, which is excel.workbook, has a hidden input. What is that input? That input is that please take the first row of every single sheet and promote that as a header. Okay, let me just help you understand. So the first part of this is the underscore. Underscore means every single binary. So you have obviously the first binary here, the second binary and the third binary. So I'm saying take up the first binary and then promote the headers. And the second part, which is the true part, is yes, promote the headers. Consider the first row as headers. If I just remove the comma and put the comma once again, you're going to see that use headers as any. That means I am telling that use the first row as the headers. Now, this gives an error because we have missed out the each part here. And now this is fine. If you were to go to the next step and then take a look at the table now, you're going to see that every single sheet and the data of the sheet, the headers are automatically promoted. And you don't have to write table.promote headers function once again, which is brilliant.
Yeah, now, indeed. And this is going to help in the performance part too, to be honest, because it's not an additional step. In the same step, you're doing the same thing.
That's right. Cool. Once we have done that, now I just click right here and I say that I don't really want to have just maybe remove other columns. And now I can click on the expand button right here. And that's where most people kind of go wrong. So if I click on the expand button, it shows me all the columns which are there in all the tables. I click on OK. The tables surely get expanded, but you're going to see that in the expanded data step that you have done, all the names of the columns are hard coded. Well, that's not a problem. It's fine.
That's the question actually I was about to ask, because most of the problem we get this error, like anybody is new working on the Power BI, even the intermediate user, they get the data from Excel and someone at the back end, they delete some of the columns or they add some of the columns, then it gets breakdown because the format has been changed and which should be dynamic. So Let's see
So
what's
yeah,
in
how do
your
we handle
bucket.
this?
Yeah.
So right now we just have to get around a way to not hard code the names of the columns, right? That's what we have to do. So let's just delete a couple of steps and then come back to this step once again. So what I'm going to do is I am going to tell Power Query, I don't really care. There are three tables, just combine them. Whatever columns you have, just combine them. I am not even going to tell you which columns to combine, just combine the columns. That's what we're going to say to Power Query. How do we say such a thing to Power Query? Well, first off, we're going to use a function called table.combine. So table.combine. Now, table.combine function asks you, hey, give me all the tables that you want to combine. So I will say, hey, here are the three tables that I want to combine. But then there is a condition to it. Power Query says that these tables that you're trying to combine should be in the form of a list. So unless I provide exactly as Power Query is asking for, this is not going to work. So I will have to, first of all, take all of these tables out and make sure they are in the form of a list, and then feed that list into the Power Query table.combine function. But how do we do all of that kind of stuff? So let's just start. So if you just click on the data column, right click, and you say drill down, what this is going to do is this is going to convert that particular column in the form of a list. Now we have a list and we have three tables in the list. Hopefully table.combine function is not going to be angry at us now. So what we can do is we can say something like table.combine, and we can say here is a list. This is nothing but a list which has three tables, and we want to combine all the tables. We are not saying which columns, we are saying just combine the tables. So now if I just close the bracket and press enter in the end, you're going to see that all the columns are combined, no hard coding of the columns whatsoever. Simple four-step query that combines all the sheets, all the columns that you have. Now, obviously, if the structure of the data changes, the schema of the data changes, you still have the flexibility to change that, but
Indeed.
it just gives you more flexibility to work with.
That's really good. Actually, it's going to help a lot of users out there. I can see that even for users like me, it's quite clever to do that. Thanks.
Cool. So we are done. And if you just go to the home tab, say I want to close and load the data, obviously the data gets loaded in a different worksheet, and that's my data. Now this is the data for year 2005, year 6, and year 7. Now let's just test this out. If I were to go back to my folder right here and I open up 2007 Excel file, in 2007 Excel file, I add a column. So let's just say that I add a category column and I mention a high category across everywhere. Doesn't matter. Now the category column has been added in 2007 Excel file, which is not there in the previous 2005 or 6 Excel files. Ideally speaking, our query should be able to handle that. On the contrary, what I'm also going to do is I'm also going to change the name of the sheet to some arbitrary name. So let's just call this as Chandeep for no reason, right? Now the sheet the sheet name is different. We have a new column added, which is only there in 2007 Excel file. Let's just see if Power Query feels good about this or not. I'm going to save it. I'm going to close it, head back to my query, right click and refresh. The query runs, all 427 rows loaded, and you can see that we have a new column called category. If I just go and take a look at that particular column, it shows me high value, and it is across all 2007 data. That's brilliant. That's it. So
Indeed, that's
yes.
great. Without breaking anything, without changing the format or anything, it's really good, working fine.
There is a caveat to this. It's
Okay.
so when you design data models in Power BI, one of the prerequisite is that the column structure names should not change. So if you are deploying this kind of scenario in your Power BI reports, your data model is very likely to break. My job is to give you flexibility as to how do you do it, but then in which scenario would you use it? That's up to you, right?
That's absolutely right, because that's a job of as a data modeler too. Because in Power BI, ideally, I always say spend your 80% time in the data modeling part, where you can even transform the data the way you would like to see your data, etc. And then
That's right.
only 20% part you should spend on the designing the report. That's how it
That's
should
right.
be done. Yeah, so I definitely can say that everyone who's watching this video right now, so please make sure up to your requirements and the way you want to handle it. If you just have one Excel file, you want to do some quick self-service, this is going to work fine. But if you have more than one tables or more than one file, you want to build your proper star schema over there, then you have to give a thought about it, what you are really trying to do over there. All right, great tip. Thanks, Chandeep.
Cool. So do you want to go for the next one?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I'm waiting and I'm very much intrigued into this one, to be honest. I love it.
Cool. Um, at times, while doing really sophisticated data cleaning or ETL in Power Query, I have come across the need that, is there a way to extract one particular step out of my query? So I have 4 steps in the query right now. And if I maybe, let's say, make a new query, so I'll just right click here, new query, and I'll say a blank query. In query number 2, if I say equals to query 1, if I just link it to this particular query, what I'm going to get is the last step of the query. Necessarily, I will get the last step of the query. That means this particular step is now there in this query. By the user interface, there is no way, or at least I don't know of a way, that I can extract any one of the steps. I don't know of a way. So I want to extract an intermediate step from the query. Once you do that, what you're going to get as an output is the last step, which is this particular step, gets loaded in query number 2 right here. I cannot at the moment extract an intermediate step of the query. There could be a way, but I don't know of a way to do that using user interface. But my need is that in query number 2, I should have the flexibility to extract any one of the steps in this query, depending upon my choice, which is going to be absolutely phenomenal and will take your ETL to the next level, right? If you can extract any one of the steps that you have done before. Well, how do we do that? So I'm going to just maybe duplicate this query for just a little bit, and I'm going to call this as, let's say, combine data records. You will understand that why did I just maybe call this as records? Although we are combining data, you understand that part, but why am I calling this as records? I will just talk about that in just a second.
Sure.
Now, what we need to do is we need to convert this query into a record. Well, what's a record? If I have to explain in the easiest possible way, a record is one row of the data. One row of the data or one row of the table is a record. If you maybe click on row number 2 right here, you're going to see that the records in Power Query appear in a vertical fashion. The name of the column, which is date, and the value, which is right here. The name of the column, which is sales rep, and the value, which is right here. That's how the records appear in Power Query.
Yep.
So I'm saying we need to convert this entire query into a record. But before I go ahead and do that, let me give you the ABC of records. So I'm going to go right here, make a new empty query. This is going to be our test record query, just for understanding. So test record. And I'm going to go over to the view tab, click on the advanced editor to open up my M code right here. All right, let's just start to create records. So records, if you want to create them in Power Query, you start with a square bracket. That's how records are initiated and created in Power Query. So let's just say that the name of the, if you remember the record had 2 parts. It had the name of the column. So you had a column and it had the value of the column, right? So that's what we are going to do it as well. So I'm going to say, hey, my column name is name and the value of that column is Jandeep. And then I'm going to say, hey, then we have the second column as city, and the city is at the moment, let's say Gurgaon. And let's say a number, and that is, let's say 100, doesn't matter. So we have got 3 columns right here, name, city, and a number. You can see that there are no syntax errors, and this is a record. If I commit to this, I am going to get a record. So you have 3 columns and you have the value of those columns. Nice and easy. That's exactly what we are going to do in our query as well. What I want you to do is notice carefully the structure. So you have the name of the column, and here could be anything. This could be a hard-coded value. This could be a formula. This could be anything. So you need to have this particular structure in the square bracket. Name of the column, any value. Name of the column, any value. That's what we need to have in the square brackets. I'm going to come out of this, go back to combine data records, which is the duplication of the query that we have done. Go over to the advanced editor, and we are going to convert this entire query into records. Well, if you remember, we did not have the let and the in statement. So I'm just going to delete all of that, delete all of that. And if you remember, we had our query in the square bracket. So I'm going to start the square bracket and close the square bracket. That's it. What was the structure of the record? The record was name of the column and anything, like it could be a formula, it could be a value, name of the column and anything, name of the column and anything, doesn't matter. Click on done, and this query has been converted into a record. Well, what do you see? You see, here is my source step, here is my custom, here is my expanded, here is my data. All of these are now records. Let's just go back to query number 2, and I'm going to reference, instead of query 1, I will reference this particular query, which is combined data records. That's why I added the suffix records. So combined data records, press enter. We have all the records. Which step do you want? Let's say I want the custom, this particular step. I can just maybe go here and say custom one. You can also click on the table for custom one, but I like writing M code, and that's what I have done. Do that, and that's your second step of the query extracted, right? So
this is brilliant. To be honest, I even never thought about it that we can extract any step like that to create it.
yeah,
Amazing.
so
I'm to be honest, I'm totally surprised to even get to know this. I'm working with Power BI since the beginning, but never thought this kind of clever stuff. Thanks a lot, Chandeep, again for sharing this. And I believe if someone is watching this video and who's really working on Power BI, they're going to get amazed too. So guys, please don't forget to comment in the comment section if you are all also surprised as I am right now. It's
so
brilliant.
I can foresee one question. Out of 100 people, maybe one person is going to think of this. So there is this query, which is our original query, which we have converted into a record, right? This entire query that we had done is converted into a record.
Yeah.
If you load this particular query in Power BI, this is not usable data. So we have destroyed our query.
Yeah.
So how do you retain the query like this? Like you have the query, which has got 4 steps. It's a legit query that can be loaded into Power BI. How do you retain the query just like that and still be able to extract any one of the steps? That can be done using a meta keyword. I will not talk about it, slightly trickier, but I have done a video on that, and I'm going to give you a link to watch that. In
Yeah,
fact, that's not
definitely.
my method. It's Imke's method. Imke from BI Accountant. She's phenomenal in Power Query. So that's her method, and that's absolutely brilliant. So she retains the query just as the way it is and still be able to extract. So what we essentially do is there is a meta keyword, and in the meta, she stores any one of the steps, and then she extracts using metadata function or something. So that's incredible.
Definitely. You will get guys a link in the description section if you are really willing to watch that video too. So please don't forget to watch that video.
So a lot of times for some very peculiar data cleansing ETL calculation requirements, you want to refer to the previous row. Sometimes you have a data where you want to find the difference from the previous row. It could be a minute by minute data. It could be something where you just want to find the difference from the previous row.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that there are not methods out there on the internet that give you the technique to refer to the previous row, which is fine. But then most of the methods work very slow on larger data sets. So if you're doing this to your fact table will choke and die. So we want to do it, but we want to do it fast. We want to have an approach which is fast. Now, there are 2 approaches to that. One is the Power Query approach. The other one is the data modeling approach. I will share the Power Query approach. And I believe that the data modeling approach is faster than the Power Query approach. But this approach that I'm going to talk about now is still reasonably fast. Let's see. So I have this 2 columnar data. The first column is the letter and the second column is a number. All that I would want to do is I want to take that in the current row. I want to add a column, and here I want to reference the previous row. Here I just want to reference the previous row. I want to reference the previous row. I want to reference the previous row. That's what I want to do. Yeah, we'll actually skip. This is a list. We'll extract it. We'll skip the last row. And then on the top, we will all the 4 values are going to then push down. On the top, we are going to add a null here. And then we will just like pack that list along as a column. And it seems like a lot of work, but that is incredibly fast.
Yeah.
Question is, how do we do all of that list work? Let's start. Step by step. The first thing first, how do I take this column and convert it into a list? We've seen that before. Right click and I'll say drill down, and that converts into a list. Now I want to skip the last value right here. So there happens to be a function called list dot remove last n. Yeah, list dot remove last n, and I am going to say that hey, from the table that I have, from this list that I have, I just want to remove the last value right here. So last value is gone. But on the top of this list, I want to add a null. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and write a null, not in the brackets, so null, and I'm going to attach this. Now the problem is that if you take a look at this particular part of the formula, this formula returns you a list. And this formula is like a single value. So you can't really concatenate non-matching data objects, right? So this null also needs to be a list to be concatenated properly. So right now it's going to give you an error. But if we just maybe put that in the curly braces, which is the initiation for a list, this is going to be like null at the start and then 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right.
Cool. Now this list needs to be added as a column here. Once we are able to add the list as a column here, we are done. Well, how do we do that? I'll make another step. And then I'm going to reference the source step here. source, which is nothing but the first step of the query. Now, what I'm going to do is the concatenation is going to happen something like this. This is going to become list number 1. This is going to become list number 2. This one is list number 3. And from all the lists, I will make one table, which is like a concatenated table. So I'm going to go ahead and say something like table.toColumns and close the bracket, press enter. Now what this is actually going to do is this is going to take the first column, mark it as a list, take the second column, mark it as a list. So now if you take a look, we have received 2 lists. Right? We don't need 2 lists, we need 3 lists. So I'm going to say that this is giving us 2 lists, which are the 2 columns of the source table. But to this list, we want to have another list concatenated, which is the numbers list. So I am just going to use the and symbol and say NOS, press enter. Well, again, we are in a problem. If you take a look, yes, if you take a look, what has happened is that we had a list, like this itself is a list, and the list had smaller lists within this. So it's like a nested list. You have a list outside, and then within which you also have a list. But this is just a list. So what we need to do is we need to again wrap this in the curly braces to say, hey, I'm giving the list in another list, like just nesting it. Now we have list 1, which is column number 1, column number 2, and column number 3, right? 3 columns of the data. Now what we'll do is we will do the reverse of what we have done.
Convert it into a table.
That's it, convert it into a table. So I'm just going to go right here and say, I'm just going to go right here and say that, hey, I have 3 lists. Please make those lists as columns. So I'm just going to come right here and say something like table.fromColumns, which is the inverse of the function that we just used, table.toColumns, close the braces, press enter, and we have got. So it has been referenced the previous row. You can see that we have definitely got the previous row. The only problem is that we have lost the column headers. So we need to have the correct column headers as well. So what I'm going to do is I am going to get the column headers. 2 column headers are going to come from the source step. And the 3rd column header, I'm going to define it by my name because it's a custom column that I'm creating. Right. So I'm going to say something like, just make a new step right here, insert. And I'm going to say, hey, why don't you find the column headers? So I'm just going to say, hey, table.column names. And I will say, hey, go to the source step, close the bracket, press enter. MN column. All right. So I have got the column names from the source step, which are at the moment 2 columns. If I just feed this list, which is the names of the columns in our function, this is going to be, let's say, from custom 1. Okay, so if I feed this in this table, if I feed the column names from here, which is the names of the columns that we have extracted, the problem is that it's going to give me an error because the table has 3 columns, but we have 2 columns. So what I need to do is I need to concatenate a column, which is like a previous row, another column to this. Again, the same problem. This gives you a list. This is not a list. So we need to concatenate the same data type structures with the same data type. So I will say, hey, why don't you just make this as a list? All right, so now we have got 3 columns, letter, numbers, and previous row. Nice to go. And here is where I'm going to say that I want to convert the lists into a table, but I also have the columns, which I did not provide it as a first input because it was optional. Now here is where I will reference custom 3, which is the names of the columns that I have. 3 contains all the 3 columns, press enter, and that is the solution. I've got one last trick if you're okay for that.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I would more than happy. I even can believe the time is passing so quickly.
Okay.
For this one.
Okay. So it's also a practical problem that a lot of people face. And let me just kind of go through that. Okay. So let's say I'm creating some dates here. So I'm going to start with 1 Jan 2020. And I'll say edate 1 of that. Drag the formula down. And that is my dates. I'm just going to maybe make 2 years worth of data. And that is up until December 21. So we start with Jan 20, Feb 20, March 20. We go up till, let's say, December 21. These are my dates. These could be any dates, like recurring dates. Right now, the dates are at the gap of a single month, but these could be like continuous dates or whatever dates in your data set. A lot of times, people create a calendar or a date table in Power Query. And if you belong to any country that does not report as per calendar standards, then you will have to create a custom fiscal calendar. One of the hardest part of creating the custom fiscal calendar is to create a custom fiscal quarter, because the names of the months are still going to be the same. Either Jan, Feb, March, they will have those 12 months. But the grouping of those months into different quarters is going to be slightly tricky. Like for example, in India, we have the quarter starting with April. That means this is Q1 in India.
Yeah.
This is Q2 in India, Q3 in India, and then the next year that is Q4 in India.
Oh.
Well, how do we solve that? In Power Query, right? How do you make a calendar table in such a way? I'm not going to create all the year columns and all the other columns. I'm sure people know how to do that. But how do you create a custom column for quarters?
Yeah.
So I'm going to load this table. First, let me just talk about the logic in Excel, because I'm just going to carry the Excel logic into Power Query, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I am going to take the date 3 months prior. The logic of taking the date 3 months prior is that in India, the financial year starts in April. This is where the year is going to start. That means these 3 months, which belong to the same year, have not been accounted in the current year. So our calendar is starting 3 months delayed, 1 month delay, 2 months delay, and 3 months delay, and that's where our financial year starts. Yeah. So you can take a look at how delayed is your financial calendar, and you can push the dates behind. Press enter, and you drag the formula down to the rest of the cells, and that is going to give you your 3 months behind date. It's right now a number format. You can convert that to a date format. This is 3 months back. All right. Once you have got the 3 months back date, what we're going to do is we're going to find the month number of this particular date. And this is month number 10, so on and so forth. And what we're going to do is we're going to group the months into multiples of 3. So I am going to say that, hey, the next multiple of 3 is 12, 12, 12. The next multiple of 3 for 1, 2, 3 is 3, 3, 3, and then 6, 6, 6, so on and so forth, right? So I'll group it into multiples of 3. The reason of grouping it into multiples of 3 is because in one quarter you have 3 months. I do that, drag the formula down. I have four numbers, 3, 6, 9, or 12. Sure enough, if you were to divide this by 3, you're going to get nothing but correct quarter numbers. So if you just now take a look at the output, like I said, April, May, June is Q1 in India, which is correct.
Yeah.
These 3 are Q2 in India, which is correct. These 3 are Q3 in India, which is correct. And these 4 are Q4, which is also correct. Nice and easy. So the trick was to take the date back, and from there you find the quarter, right? Yeah. But Power Query makes it easier because there is a built-in function for Power Query to find the quarter. So all that we'll have to do is take the date 3 months behind, which is ridiculously easy. So let's delete all of that. Let's go back and fire up Power Query and start from there. All right, currently the data type is set to date time. I'm just going to change that to date. Press enter, we good to go. Now, I'm just going to go ahead, select this particular column, and I am going to go to the Add Columns tab. I have a date column right here, and I'll say, hey, I want to find out the quarter and quarter of the year. Now you can see that you get 1, 2, 3, 4, and the function that Power Query has used is date.quarter of the year. It is automatically understanding that these 3 months are Q1, these 3 months are Q2. Well, guess what? Our calendar is 3 months delayed, and all that I'm going to do is this date, which is this particular column right here, I'm going to delay it by 3 months. That's it. So I am just going to say something like date. We don't have an edate function in Power Query. We have date.addMonths. So I'm just going to say date.addMonths. Here is my date. Please take the date and push it 3 months back. Do that. And it just, I think I missed a bracket or something. Yeah. You missed that, and we have quarter. That's it. And we have this as Q4. Now, obviously, you can do a prefix of the Q and all of that you want to do, but that is your Indian fiscal quarter. So this is Q4. Sorry, this is Q4 data. This is Q1 data, so on and so forth. So that was a little hack.
That's definitely going to help a lot of people, because I receive generally lots of questions on the fiscal year, and back in days I created one video on how to create a fiscal year calendar table, and I received so many comments on that. So definitely this is going to help them to adjust it according to their own needs. Wow, this is quite an interesting session, to be honest. I learned a lot myself, and I believe all those guys are out there. You can also take the advantage from this. So please don't forget to watch it complete, and also the links in the description section. Once again, thank you so very much for this very interesting and intriguing session. I hope everyone can take some part of your wisdom too, and they can learn from your own experience. and they can definitely follow your channel. They're going to find the link in the description section, or they can see also on the screen. So please, guys, do follow Chandeep's Goodly. Is doing a lots of good work around the world and
Thank you.
empowering everyone in their data journey. Yeah, till then, have a good life. Enjoy the Goodly.